Hello, and welcome to today's Industry Week webinar, State of the Market, Why Manufacturers Are Using DataOps to Outperform Their Peers, sponsored by HighByte. I'm Jill Jesko, and I'm Executive Editor of IndustryWeek. Before we begin, I'd like to explain how you can participate in today's presentation. First, if at any time you're having audio difficulties or your slides aren't advancing, simply hit your F5 key to refresh your webcast console. If you are running pop-up blocking software, you will need to disable that to view the webinar. If you have any technical difficulties during today's session, please press the !help button in the upper right corner to receive assistance in solving common issues. This webinar technology allows you to resize the presentation by clicking the maximize icon in the upper right corner to enlarge the window. We welcome your questions during today's event. To submit your questions, simply type your question into the Ask the Question window on the left side of your screen and hit the Submit button. We will be answering as many questions as possible during the Q&A session that follows the main presentation. But please feel free, and in fact, we encourage you to send in your questions at any time as they occur to you, and we will add them to the queue. Also, don't forget to check out the Resources tab on your console for a copy of the State of the Market report provided by our sponsor, HighByte. Please also be aware that today's session is being recorded and it will be available on the IndustryWeek website within the next day for you to review. You will be notified by email when that archive is available. When the webinar ends, we ask that you please take a moment to complete the feedback form that will appear on your screen. And with that, I'd like to welcome our panel. Joining us today is John Harrington, Chief Product Officer of HighByte, Brian Zakrasek, Specialist Leader, Smart Factory for Deloitte Consulting, and Brent Robertson, co-founder of Fathom. For further information about our panelists, please again check out the Speaker Details tab on your console. And with that, welcome, gentlemen. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Jill. I'm excited to be joined with John and Brian. We've had a whole lot of fun building up into today. And before we dive into the content today, I thought it would be great just to give a sense of where the three of us are coming from. My role in this is really to represent the data, and I've been involved with the team since the beginning, developing the research that brought together so many voices from the marketplace to understand better about what's going on in their world of manufacturing and digital transformation and industrial data ops. So I'll be representing the data. John, why don't you start us off, give us a sense of where you're coming from in all this.
Yeah, thanks, Brent. So as the Chief Product Officer of HighByte, HighByte is a software company. We make DataOps software. So we are very focused in talking with a lot of people about DataOps, about the challenges that they're experiencing, about how DataOps can help them, improve and accelerate their digital transformation projects. So HighByte is a software vendor and very interested in the research and excited about what we're going to talk about today.
Great. Thanks, John. Brian?
Thanks, Brent. Yeah, and so my perspective as a specialist leader for Deloitte in our smart factory practice, I very client-facing, serve a lot of our large technical implementations around digital transformation in that manufacturing space. And this concept of data ops and managing data in general is a major piece of success as we not only wake up digital transformation, but digital transformation at scale. Using limited resources and limited time. So great to be on this call and looking forward to the conversation.
Excellent. All right, well, let's dive in. I'm going to take a few minutes just to give a little bit of background on what the purpose of this was. And so this whole project began as really being curious about a handful of questions. And what we were able to receive was really the real-time state-of-the-art insights from 150 manufacturing professionals across various different kinds of operations, both operational engineering and IT, from organizations of different shapes and sizes. But what we're really after, what we're going to cover today is a better understanding of where manufacturers are on their digital transformation journey, the kind of investments they're making, any standout inhibitors to progress. How well understood DataOps actually is, and to what degree is it being applied, acknowledging, which we'll definitely talk about, that it's an emergent field, what the benefits of it are, and how people are taking on this approach. And then, of course, how are DataOps deployments unfolding? What state are they in, even as it relates to system architecture, et cetera? And then finally, what kind of impacts on culture and attitude have on digital transformation products, which is kind of an exciting thing that came through this whole process as well. So we heard from 150 manufacturers, and part of that also is your questions. Even signing up for this, we asked for questions. And so these are some of the ones that came through. We'll be addressing a few of these and more as we come toward the end of our time together, the last 10 minutes or so. But keep the questions coming. Please feed any questions into your console as they come up through our conversation today. A little bit of who we heard from. We have a nice mix of folks that are in executive positions, vice president, director level, manager, and supervisors being about 50% of the respondents. And then a variety of roles across operations, engineering and R&D, corporate executive management, IT, technology management, et cetera, which sort of give us a really great and inclusive landscape of feedback. But what came through, and I'll just touch on these and open this up for John and Brian, that attitudes about digital transformation are optimistic, and that there is a segment of manufacturers that seem to be ahead of the game, probably for many reasons, which I'd love to hear more about from John and Brian, ahead of compared to their peers. That DataOps technology is being embraced even as an emergent practice, and that there is ongoing implementations. And those that seem to be making greater investment in DataOps are also the higher performers. And then, of course, how people, process, and culture play a huge part, and attitudes play a huge part in embracing not only industrial DataOps, but also digital transformation as a whole. But let me pause there and just invite John and Brian in to weigh in on this.
I think from our perspective, it's exciting to see that manufacturers are embracing new technologies, that they're moving forward, they're thinking proactively, they're trying to, drive their businesses. That manufacturing is going through this kind of renaissance of sorts in terms of leveraging technology and turning itself from a dirty business of old into a modern, digital, rapidly innovating and agile business. And I think DataOps is one of the key things, and digital transformation is one of the key things that are enabling that. And for myself, I love working with manufacturers. I've worked with them all my life, and I'm excited. I'm excited about what the next 5-10 years holds because of this transformation that companies are going through.
Yeah, I think I'd comment from a Deloitte perspective. Most of our clients are a little bit north of that, $1 billion mark, right? We tend to operate with larger customers and clients, and very common. This is sort of the way it pans out. It's we've done a bunch of things, but more forward-looking. These are the broad set of capabilities we want to unlock, and we will unlock in this time horizon, right? So there's very clear commitment to the type of capabilities and value-driven approaches that they need. And then a natural next step is, do we have the right tech stack to enable it? And I think tech stack is it's like just the top of that iceberg, because what we find is it's the technology, it's the platforms, it's the processes, it's the people, do we use things that we already have? Do we standardize in different ways? Do we invest in new technologies? And so all of that sort of gets wrapped up into how our clients are sort of looking at how do we approach that scale issue of getting things done in a short amount of time with limited resources, possibly using new tools. So.
Great. One of my favorite questions to ask, of course, is to get a sense of, how respondents feel they're doing as it relates to digital transformation. And this says a lot, right? By far and away, most who responded feel like they're in line with industry peers. However, if we look above that, right, that many feel they're ahead of their industry peers, and some, 10%, saying that they're ahead of any industry as it relates to digital transformation. Curious about your take on this.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of like these. These are a little bit subjective, right? When you ask, and I would argue that most of our clients probably look like this across their overall enterprise, right? There's probably certain portions of the business that are doing really well, certain transformation scale ideas and value drivers that are working, and other ones that are kind of just getting started. And so I think there's also a double layer of, depending on where you sit in the organization, you may or may not have a different perspective of how you're doing, quote unquote, right?
Yeah, I think the survey at some level self-selects the people that are thinking about transformation, that are thinking about progress, that are thinking about new ways of doing things. But I think it also shows the excitement and the interest. And at some level, you would think that the people that are responding would score themselves even higher. So I think that people actually hold themselves back, or they recognize there's still a lot of work to be done, and there's still a lot of work for the HighByte team and for the Deloitte team to help these manufacturers out, because they probably don't want to be in line. They want to be ahead. They want to be driving faster and further. But there are some key challenges, and it's figuring out how we can help them solve those challenges to get ahead.
Yeah, I find this slide to be hopeful and maybe a great reference point for those on this webinar to say, oh, well, where am I and how would I see myself in this, as a place of clearly there is a deep interest in pursuit of taking it further, which leads us to the next slide here, which has to do with attitudes. And I found this fascinating, been involved in research projects for many years now, and, through digital transformation's early stages. And it's really, I'd say, wonderful to see like how attitudes have changed to, the largest group here having a very positive attitude, and including deep engagement and ownership and utilization of digital transformation as a whole. And it's not without its challenges, right? And maybe we can speak to both of these things. What do we think is leading to this really shift in positive attitude? And then really looking at some of these challenges. The biggest ones indicated here are, systems integrations. Obviously, the complexity of all of this. There's so many moving parts and pieces that integration has become a significant challenge. I find this one pretty consistent. That lack of executive vision and support. That these kinds of initiatives really require a dedicated leadership. Vision is a great force to really drive integration and a culture to support that. And then, of course, a properly trained and adaptable workforce who's ready and prepared for the utilization of these more advanced digital technologies. So curious about, what does this say to you both?
I think for me, in terms of the attitudes, I think we're beyond the skepticism, which is great. 5 years ago, 8 years ago, people would kind of snicker at it and laugh at it and be skeptical of it. And now we're beyond that, and we're into sitting down and making some progress. So that's exciting that there's only 1% that's negative, and that there's so much positive and potential there. The challenges just kind of lead a roadmap for Brian and the Deloitte team and the HighByte team to go down. And I think that they closely match areas that we're going to talk about today, and that we're focused on. And I would say that we hear the exact same challenges, right? System integrations, and of course, that's where DataOps comes into play. But a huge challenge is training and workforce. People don't even know how to use the data, let alone how to get it in their hands properly, if they had it. So training is definitely things that we hear, especially when you get from the enterprise out to the sites and you get down into the people that are doing the work. How do they know, we need to train them how to leverage data. So this aligns pretty closely with where we see things. Brian, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, maybe just to extend the workforce side of it, where we often see the gap is getting the executives aligned, I think, is one hurdle. But what we find on the execution side is a lot of times it's hard to find, quote unquote, these sort of unicorns that live out in the world and these, middle of America places where things are built. How do we find those people to do the work that is different than what they're doing today? And so, like, transformation doesn't happen as a fractional resource, right? Transformation is like not a part-time job. So, having the clarity to say, we're going to need new roles, we're going to need new organizations, we're going to need new governance policies that span previous silos that didn't exist. That's the work that happens, right? And there's a really nice parallel when I see a question in the chat about what is DataOps. We're going to get there. But the technology itself helps to bridge those gaps and silos. It helps to make the data discovery a little more easy. And there's a really nice parallel between people and what these processes and technologies, open up.
And no more telling slide than evidence of vision in future is, where are we investing? And what was really powerful about this is that 83% of respondents are either increasing or at least sustaining their investments in, we'll say, DataOps technology as a bucket of many, many things, as indicated here. There's a lot of future investment being made across these categories. And I think also worth noting on this is the diversity of categories in which investments are being made. And I thought it'd be great if you both just sort of weigh in on what you notice about this and anything here that caught you by surprise.
Yeah, I think maybe the obvious thing is, we're going to keep investing in smart systems, smart machines, smart solutions. We're going to keep shifting workloads between on-prem and edge and cloud and back and forth as we sort of right size the use cases and the things. I like seeing, some of the, at the bottom, some of the buzzwords have sort of fallen off. I think, our infatuation with augmented reality and some of that, I think some people are a little bit disenfranchised with where the technology is today and probably have some bigger fish to fry. Things like digital twin, I think some people have been bitten trying to do maybe a low value digital twin application. And so I think people are being a little cautious there. And probably the one that disheartens me a little bit is, coming from a former life where I led a nice sized simulation team. I think simulation is a really valuable aspect of understanding, now that we have all of that data, now that we have the power of analytics and cloud and can move data very efficiently in real time. I think simulation was lower than I would hope for. But John?
Yeah, I thought in looking at the list, I'm excited about the balance. It's, if you were to read industry press today, you would say everything is about AI, and with a maybe secondary of cybersecurity, but everything is AI. And AI is great in machine learning and how we're using the data, but I think I'm excited also that people are taking a step back and recognizing that it's not just about the end application, it's about the infrastructure to deliver on that. So whether it's, the robotics and automation to create the data, the cloud compute as a place to deliver, as a place for the data to be stored, the data ops to get it there. It's investment everywhere, and so the breadth of investment was what kind of struck me, even down to Wi-Fi and some of the other things that people are constantly pushing, and so it's I think that was kind of what struck me as the breadth of the investment.
Yeah, maybe just one tack on here is, when you look at these aren't in isolation, right? These aren't investments in isolation. I mean, I think a lot of the use cases that we work on with our clients touch at least half of these, right? When you think about data ops and connectivity and new sensors and analytics and cloud, like it's that whole gamut. And so it's hard to look at these in isolation.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a great point in all of this, is that clearly this starts to really illustrate the ecosystem required to take advantage of what digital transformation promises. And I think even noting, there aren't any what we'll call silver bullets here. There was that time, I remember it well, when augmented reality was going to save everything, right? There's no one technology that makes it all possible. It's really bringing them together in a thoughtful way, as evidenced by the diversity of investments being made here. Now, I'm going to drop a claim in here and a statement, I think, that just brings this all together. And I will say, this statement is backed up with the research report, which you all who are listening to this have access to. There's lots and lots of data in there that points to this claim, which is manufacturers who have a more positive attitude toward digital transformation are also making bigger investments in technology such as industrial data ops, and that these are the same companies that are also performing beyond their peers. So I'm going to just drop that in here and just curious about your take on this statement. What do you have to say about that?
I think this highlights, it's a great statement, but it highlights the value that people are driving out of digital innovation and digital transformation, and that you need to start with the positive attitude, with the vision. I think positive attitude and vision go hand in hand. And rolling back to one of the earlier slides, you need to have that vision. You need to have the positive attitude in order to deliver on these. And with them, the benefits are achievable. It's not fake. It's not kind of pie in the sky. These things are achievable, and companies are delivering on them today. So you got to embrace it, because as Brian said, it's not a simple thing. There's a lot of work to be done, but there's a lot of value that you can drive out of it.
Yeah, maybe what I just add here too is from a positive attitude perspective, you just can't underestimate how important it is to bring the entire enterprise along for the journey. I think accepting places where things didn't go as well, but also really celebrating from the people that are on the plant floor, from the people that are getting value from the solution, really cascading and building marketing campaigns internally and doing good change management around that. I can think one of the clients we work with, which is a global logistics company, HighByte is part of the solution. Hearing the words coming from the maintenance workers, right, on the solution and the value that they're seeing, and how it's changing the way they work and changing the number of phone calls they get in the middle of the night, those are just super impactful, and that really boosts the mood, right, of the organization and the ability to maybe sustain the painful times, right, knowing that there's good benefits on the other side.
Yeah, this really points to, if a place to pay attention to that's going to make a great deal of difference in making more progress on this journey, it's really pouring into the conditions that favor a positive attitude toward it. It makes a great deal of difference. And it's nice how this even lays out almost the math. Attitude first, and then investments and so forth. Otherwise, you end up with a more Sisyphean approach to this, which could be very hard to be pushing rocks up hills, as opposed to having overall organizational engagement and excitement about the prospects of it. And speaking of prospects of it, one of the things that's important is to really state, well, what is industrial DataOps? I think it's important to recognize it is an emergent space, and maybe, and we'll talk about familiarity with it. But John, why don't you lead us through, really a definition of and speak to, the relationship between people, technology, and process, as well as it relates to data ops.
Yeah, thanks. So data ops as a concept came out of the IT world. It kind of followed DevOps, but it's taking a disciplined approach to data, and specifically around the movement and curation of data, so that you're taking a more holistic view and a less point-to-point piecemeal view of it. So in order to do that, and if you map that into the industrial world, a lot of industrial data resides in machinery on the factory floor. It resides in a lot of systems around the factory. There's a remarkable number of databases and systems around on the factory floor that are collecting information that aren't even really exposed in the IT world. But then there are also all of the IT systems, the MES systems, the ERP systems, and then of course all of our new cloud and analytics. And so DataOps is about focusing on the data. How do we deliver the data to all these different applications efficiently? And it's really taking, on the people side, it's taking the OT team, working with the IT team, working with the line of business, the people who are trying to get access to the data. So it's about getting the data in the hands of R&D and quality and the maintenance team and the sustainability team or the governmental reporting team, and getting them access to the data that they need efficiently. Looking at some of the processes around data contracts, data governance, those are concepts that have been in the IT side for a while, but we haven't really seen them on the OT side. So bringing some of these consistent processes into the OT side, but also looking at system architectures. We've never really had architects. Enterprise architects were in the IT side, but not really in the OT side. OT has generally been deployed based on projects. We're going to deploy this new system, we're going to deploy this new machinery, and we're going to take that project and we're just going to do it, as opposed to more of an architectural view. And then, of course, on the technology side, we do see new technologies coming into play. Industrial data starts at the edge, so you really have to start at the edge. Some data stays at the edge. We're seeing edge analytics. A lot of data is moving potentially to a data center, but a lot of it's moving to the cloud. So how do we efficiently move data? How do we pull the data together? These concepts of unified namespace is being widely investigated and widely adopted. So that's a really exciting concept of really democratizing data, providing access to the data, to not prescribing who wants what data, but more allowing people to just see all the data that's available and they can subscribe to what they need. So DataOps is kind of about bringing all of this together into a discipline. And then but where it's not the analytics, it's the movement of the data, it's the delivery of the data, the curation of the data, but not the actual end application, because that's a whole nother piece of our industry in terms of the AI or the dashboard or whatnot. So that's where we see DataOps.
Brian, how about you? Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot that I could latch onto there, but I think a couple of pieces that maybe I'll just expand on is, one is that enterprise architecture approach, right? I think as we see organizations move deeper and deeper into the concepts of enterprise architecture and architecture strategy net large, it truly extends down into the OT environments. It's, for the larger clients that we work for, it's rare that they haven't already converged very substantially down in where the IT systems are way down into the OT systems. But now it's, but maybe the governance and the ownership and the decision rights haven't sort of shifted yet. And so I don't want to assume that it's a top-down approach, but it is a holistic approach to thinking around these converged architectures, because, the OT and the IT and the engineering data, that's all available, that it spans so many silos that companies are realizing that they need that holistic approach, and they need to do it on a very steady basis. Other things to add, I think another thing maybe just to sort of hint on is, this DataOps doesn't imply, or industrial DataOps doesn't imply that traditional systems of record go away, right? I think that a lot of times people will want to say, well, does this tool replace this? I want to put this in this box and this in this box. Are historians dead? Do I not need my MES anymore? Should I, not be putting our data in the data lake? Yes, no, maybe, right? But I think there's a ton of value that's been built up because of the timelines that, especially in the process industries, but also in discrete and hybrid, how much data has been collected and the processes that have been built up over time and the value of those systems. DataOps is like the glue, or to use one of my clients' terms, if he's listening, it's the mortar that sort of brings these things together efficiently, right? So that we're not misusing, that 99% of data that goes unused, to use that classic stat. It's, transforming exactly what we need in time, and then being able to manage and maintain the quality of it consistently, right? And improve it day over day, hour over hour, and not week over week, month over month.
To build on what Brian was just talking about around the enterprise, companies have had financials for their enterprise for many, many years, 100 years or more. And they've used ERP systems to be able to roll them up. But in general, most of them have never had common metrics below into the manufacturing space. They didn't have common metrics. They didn't have common visibility. They only rolled up the financials, and each site ran itself and ran alone. And what we're seeing, one of the key things of digital transformation is that people want that enterprise view. They want the enterprise to be able to provide value, not just financial value to the sites, but to be able to provide knowledge and sharing and visibility and exposure to the sites, and to get into that manufacturing data. So we're seeing this huge push of pulling data out of the sites, landing it in, the cloud provides us the ultimate architecture to be able to do that, land the data in the cloud, let us roll it up. But the challenge is, how do we do this consistently? Because every site was run independently. So DataOps kind of delivers on this, but it's very much a digital transformation. How do we roll this out across our enterprise? How do we drive greater value? And then thinking about, what are the use cases that we're delivering? Who needs access to the information? And how can we do it efficiently? So we're seeing whereas OT is generally very site, digital transformation is coming in much more at that enterprise view and trying to deliver value from that perspective. And that's where it gets really interesting and really powerful for the companies as well.
For those of you that are listening to this webinar who would say you're would consider yourself not an expert, or maybe not that entirely familiar with DataOps, you're not alone. It is an emergent field. And this says it quite nicely, like landing right in the middle. 29% would say they're, we'll say mildly familiar with it, with only 12% saying they're extremely familiar. I'm curious both about John and Brian what you have to say about this, but I'm also really interested in, what do you notice about how you're introducing this conversation and this concept into organizations? What seems to get the most traction, going from the unfamiliar to the not just familiar, but willing to embrace it?
Yeah, so I always like to root things in places of knowledge, right? And so John led in about sort of the first input of DevOps, right? And sort of now there's all these other XOps, machine learning ops, model ops, data ops, DevSecOps, right? And this concept of operations-based deployment of what you're trying to solve for, right? And so I think the very simple aspects are, this is an operations approach to how we handle data, and it's all about speed and scale, right? Speed and scale and maintainability. The old way is really not an option anymore at the speed and scale that clients are trying to solve things for. And so that's my simplified way of explaining it.
Brian, would you say that the old way is we buy an application and then we try to connect it up, or we buy a piece of machinery and then we connect it up, but it's the end application or the end machinery, versus I think of DataOps as being we're going to take an architectural view of everything that goes on in the middle. It's, at some level, it's the pipelining of data or the plumbing of data, the movement of it efficiently, to your point, at scale, maintainable, that kind of thing. And so it's, recognizing, I think the old approach was we just need to buy this system and then we'll just hook it up. And this is kind of stepping back.
I mean, the enterprise viewpoint's a natural extension of just how connected we've gotten, right? Like back when we could think about our plant, our factory as a plant and a factory, and the people that worked inside and the systems that supported it, they were on premise, they supported the local systems, they were smart, they figured out how to integrate things, they figured out how to write custom code, they figured out how to make do with the systems and platforms that they had. And so you get some heterogeneity, right? To use like the soft word of what we see out there, right? It's a mess. And so, to take a look at that and say that's not sustainable, using that, that architecture, that holistic architecture as an approach, it really does help solve the complexity that lives at the nodes, right? And so I think if we can think really thoughtfully around infrastructure, both in the data ops perspective, but even other infrastructure approaches, the way we approach mobile platforms and passive security monitoring and publish and subscribe, unified namespace architectures, all of these help shift us towards this, feasibility, capability to solve the many use cases we have.
Yeah, that's a great segue to the next slide here. And I think, one of the things about DataOps is, what it allows for is a lot. And what we asked that question, and here's what came back as, what were the promises or assumed promises of embracing industrial DataOps that had the most value to respondents? Right at the top there, right? Making more informed decisions. So just curious about your take on this and anything in here that agrees with what you've also seen, but maybe other things that surprised you here.
My first response was that I was excited that saving money was not at the top of the list, and that driving, better decisions and processes and reducing waste is what's at the top of the list. So it's like hopeful that it's about the positive as opposed to the negative. It's about the carrot rather than the stick. Brian, I don't know what you were thinking.
One of the things I really like about all of these op models is they are rooted in lean manufacturing concepts, right? It is about reducing waste. It is about maintaining uptime. It is about reducing downtime. It is about doing more with less. And so, like, this audience should be able to take that away very clearly, that these are mechanisms that create a lot of reusability. It should be a 1 + 1 = 3 when done correctly, because you're using the right practices. And so I really like the concept of, it's the fourth or fifth bullet, freeing up resources to focus on strategic tasks. I think we talk, it's like a throw over the fence sort of perspective that we say, oh, we're going to free up data so it's discoverable and easy to use. Done well, that's actually very possible, right? There's not a lot of folks that can go in and manipulate, a 20-year-old CNC and pull data out and restructure and parse it and send it up to whatever cloud application you need to do. But if you have the right infrastructure to enable that, you can be a lot farther along that journey without having that sort of resource there. So I like the concept of freeing up people. That's a very limited resource that we can't recreate.
The other thing that struck me about this list is that some of them are about how we're using the data, and some of them are about how we're able to deliver the data, right? So we're freeing up resources, say from IT or from OT, because we're taking a much more engineered approach to delivering. But there's also the OEE, and there's the reducing waste and things that are more about how the factory is running. And that is one area that I think a lot of people thinking about data ops, from our experience, struggle with. Of, this is a concept that it enables our teams to run more effectively, but it also enables all of these other projects that we're trying to deliver on, which are very common and consistent across many years. It's It's how do I drive improvements in my production line? How do I reduce the amount of waste or poor quality, increase the yield? How do I improve my uptime? In DataOps is seen as a key solution to scale those out. You can deliver those projects independently, but in order to scale those out, you need to take that approach, take an engineered approach to moving data. And DataOps is really the concept that covers that. So a lot of those use cases that we see with our customers is, Brian talked about scale earlier. It's all about scale. We can deliver these projects in small proof of concepts very easily, very quickly, efficiently. But in order to scale them out, we need to take a much more disciplined approach, and that's where DataOps comes in.
Yep. For those who have joined us live today, we're about 10 minutes away from inviting your questions. So please use your console to throw in any questions that you're curious about, and we'll do our best to get to them in about 10 minutes. This next slide is really just so telling. There's one thing about familiarity and the promises of, but what's the reality of leveraging it? And what's interesting about this tables, we broke this down by size organization because there was clear differences based on size of organization and how DataOps are being leveraged. But I think some of the headlines here is, those that were more familiar are also sort of more mature in their use of DataOps, being that they're being rolled out in more strategic enterprise form across multiple facilities at a greater rate. And that those with a stronger relationship with that are also increasing investments in DataOps. And there seems to be this sweet spot of, 500 million to 900 million size companies seem to be a little bit ahead here. Curious about your take on this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I wasn't surprised. Like, is it a true cause-effect relationship? Maybe, maybe not. But I think I'm not surprised, right? So if you're in that 500 to a billion range, your enterprise has a certain amount of complexity, has a certain amount of maturity, has probably decades of technical value and technical debt that you've built up across multiple sites and the enterprise. And you probably have some pretty strong ambitions to go forward. And maybe you lack some of the governance and some of the overhead and burden that might exist in larger organizations that we find, from financial approvals to broader stakeholder alignment, even to just like true silos, right? True silos that exist. There might be just a magic little sweet spot that's happening there, right? Where people can make decisions more quickly. They can scale things out internally based on their own word of mouth and success. So I guess I'm not surprised by that, but maybe I'll just counter by saying that some of our much larger clients we see also moving very fast as well, right? And I think it just comes from the want and the will and the empowerment that happens, right? We also see large clients that say that and then don't. So I'll just sort of leave that there. I think it's a nice observation.
Yeah, I'll also say that I was surprised by this. We tend to talk with a lot of companies that are in the billion plus. We certainly have some customers that are in less than 500 million as well. So we span the whole range, but the majority are in the larger size. And I think they're moving. I think that it could be that their environments are so complex that the employees in those companies feel like they're slower. To Brian's point, that 500 to 900 million they can be much more agile and they can move faster because they can make decisions quicker. But we're seeing a lot of activity and a lot of interest with very large companies. And then we've also seen some really small companies like 50 million to 100 million that are modern, agile, and just running, sprinting. And that's also fun to see. So we see very much a broad range.
And that, I think, brings us to, again, the data really informed this statement, which high performers are also ahead in their digital transformation journey, regardless of company revenue, and they're making greater investments in DataOps technology compared to their peers. Curious about your take on this.
Yeah, again,
Go ahead, Brian.
I'm not surprised. I mean, I think
Yep.
Again, I think success breeds more success, and I think people that go fast want to go faster. And so I think what folks are finding is that when you have success, it's the old flywheel analogy, right? Things are moving and running, and people are starting to look around. Hey, we're kind of capped out with the way that we're doing things now. How do we do things faster? And DataOps is a very natural transition to that. All of the XOps are, and data delivery and data contextualization and data observability and management are all key aspects to keeping that flywheel turning.
To dive even a little deeper here is, obviously the strong correlation between DataOps and digital transformation. And again, the underscore here is those more familiar are further along in their digital transformation journey. They're more likely to make investments. They're better at collecting data and preparing that data compared to their peers. Again, there is some shift here depending on the size of the organization. I invite you to speak to this.
I think 5 years ago, DataOps wasn't really being discussed. It had been invented as a term in the IT space with a few companies, but generally it wasn't being discussed. And if you think back in the industrial space, we were all talking about IoT platforms and big data, and IoT platforms and big data. And I think what people have the front runners, they were sprinting and they were going, and then they hit a wall in terms of scale. And not only scale is coupled with maintainability. Because one thing that we've heard from a lot of companies is, we were running and sprinting and we had everything in place. And then we found that our OT and IT teams spent all their time trying to maintain existing solutions and had no time for any more innovation. Like, we hit a wall there. And people are then stepping back and rethinking, how do we, what do we need to do to make this scale faster? And to go back to the very first slide or the second slide that we commented on, systems integration, right? That's what's holding back our digital transformation. Well, DataOps solves that systems integration. That's its core function is, how do we make systems integration, and by definition, systems integration is really about data integration. How do we make data integration delivery scalable and maintainable? So I think it very much aligns with this set of data. The faster you're going, the more you recognize the need for this, and it shows a lot of potential there.
Yeah, I think it's telling in that chart. If you look at the gray line, it clearly shows those that identified as ahead of their industry or any industry. It clearly shows to the degree in which integration has taken place, and the biggest benefits are being had through increased strategic integration, not just in one facility but multiple facilities. And then where people felt they were behind, you can just sort of see that they aren't embracing it as well. It's a sort of inverse curve here, which I think is pretty powerful. It sort of leads us to this, right? Here's the bottom line. Those that are adopting industrial DataOps are simply in a stronger position than those who aren't. And the correlation between utilization and progress on digital transformation and overall revenue performance is clear and consistent. The data plays this out very, very clearly. Any final thoughts here on just the punchline?
I think people are realizing data is critical to their success, right? No matter whether it's data for R&D, data for sales, data for marketing, data for industrial, data for quality, it's recognizing that you need to create a discipline of data within your organization. You need to teach people, and people need to learn. and you need to leverage it and deliver it much more effectively. And I think it's exciting times for all of us in the industry.
Completely agree.
One thing that did come up, and we were curious about, right, is there any correlation to reporting structure, system architecture, governance practices? The research didn't bear out any significant patterns. It did, though, really, this last bullet really kept reinforcing the tone by leadership, a clear commitment, vision for it, and a attitude of positivity toward digital transformation seemed to be the difference maker. Not to say that there isn't a more beneficial reporting structure, system architecture, governance practice that may accelerate things. I'm curious, are you seeing this as well, or did this catch you by surprise? What do you make of this?
Maybe just a quick comment here. I think, one of the challenges that we see often from the executive side is knowing they need to do all of these things, but maybe not knowing, if we double click in, what are those things they need to do. And so I think a lot of times we're helping our clients inform up, into the organization on why does this investment create value to what they're interested in. They may not care about DataOps. DataOps on its own is not like a value generator, like no one's investing so that we can have the best DataOps platform, but it's to enable all of those outcomes. And so I think the more that we can create this transparency of what are the right investments to drive the value that makes sense for the business, then that tone's going to be amazing, right? But we shouldn't expect a bunch of VPs and SVPs, truly understanding what we're talking around here. So, but the importance of data is important, and the importance of using data efficiently to drive value is clear.
We also hear a lot about democratizing the data and making data available. One thing that I think that we can all say, and that we've learned over the last 3 years, is that business changes pretty quickly, and it's being changed based on a lot of external factors, and the data that you needed 3 years ago to run your plant could be very different than what you need today because of supply chain, because of people not working in the office, because of lots of different things. So you need a much more flexible environment than what we used to have, and the systems need to be flexible. The data, we need to be flexible with our people. We need to put some level of trust in those people. We need to put it within a cybersecurity frame and dome around everything, but we need to allow people to have access to data so that they can make good decisions and make them quickly and efficiently. And I think that comes down to the whole leadership, and it's the tone of the leadership, it's the vision, it's the enabling the workers at whatever level and at whatever role they have in the business to be able to make decisions and get access to the information that they need. So I think it's really exciting, and it becomes very exciting for the teams that are involved. It's no longer you will do this job for the next 50 years. It's a much more dynamic environment.
Love it. So before I hand it off back to Jill to bring in some of the live questions, these are some of the questions that came through as people signed up for this webinar. I've got a couple that I want to ask, and then we'll move it on to the live questions. The first one is, what are market leaders doing with DataOps? Those in the lead, what you're seeing are edge cases that are sort of ahead of the game. What are they doing with DataOps that seems to stand out to you both?
John, do you want to take that one, or I can?
Sure. Yeah. We see the market leaders are being extremely agile. They're taking an enterprise approach, and they're creating centers of excellence and things in those sorts of teams. But then they're being extremely agile, and they're trying a lot of things, and the ones that succeed, they then double down on it. And so they'll try it at one site, they'll let it run for 6 months, and if it succeeds, then they'll try and scale that out to 20 sites. On the other hand, they recognize that not everything's going to succeed, and they're throwing things away that don't, and they're keeping on moving on. So we're seeing this center of excellence, very much enterprise view, and very much how can we leverage data? What are the new technologies that we can use? But always driving value to the customer, to the business. It's all about what's the use case that we're trying to solve for? What's the business problem of today? Is it quality? Is it yield? Is it productivity? Is it uptime? And let's solve for that. That's what we see.
Yeah, that makes sense. And just to stitch in another one of these questions, a lot of times, we at Deloitte are faced with our clients to look at the value side of the coin, right? John made some points about recurring investment and sustaining investment and being willing to scrap some things and go do other things. Like it takes some trust, but you have to show wins along the way too. And so I think ensuring that as you go after these larger initiatives, whether it's a pilot with scale or it's something more broad, having the value-based metrics set up early, right? Whether you can measure them now or not, or you can make some measured assumptions or not, and then continue to restructure your value understanding and, keep putting those notches for wins as you move along the way, because I think that's what also allows you to keep reinvesting in that sort of flywheel approach, right? And not be a one and done, or move their teams back to their day to day, right?
Yeah. Based on time, I'm going to move us. I'm going to hand this back over to Jill. I want to make sure we have time for some of the live questions. So Jill, what's come in?
Okay, we have, as you've mentioned, a couple questions come in, so we are going to jump right in. However, I do first want to remind everybody, please take a moment to complete the feedback form that will appear on your screen at the end of the webinar. And with that reminder, our first question is, most companies still are drowning in data and do not have the number of data scientists needed to mine and demonstrate value. How valuable are edge devices that automate the data and send recommendations and solutions by a number of communication methods?
Yeah, I'll hit on that first. I think, and I'll strap it forward a little bit. I think, one of the old ways was to make sure that we broadly connected to lots of data, understood the sequential and rules-based triggering of how we would notify people. And what we quickly found is that we over-notified everyone. And then, no, it didn't actually move the ball forward. I think one of the really interesting sides of where that sort of conversation moves forward is in that generative AI sort of space. And so if we have all of this data, have all of this understanding, can we take all of that and give you thoughtfully trained, focused on your business challenges, recommendations on what to do, right, in real time? And that might lower the bar, the need to have data scientists or analysts or experts do that. And so it's sort of solving the problem with a new side of technology. And so I really like the generative AI as that sort of co-pilot functionality, or that assistant type personality to sift through a lot of that data wherever it lives, right?
Yeah, so it's funny, Brian, you took a very different, I got triggered by drowning in data, and I always think to myself, we need a lot of data, but it needs to be collected for purpose. And, I often will tell companies, you have nearly infinite data in your factory because you've got devices that have hundreds of thousands of data points. You may have, these are automation devices, you may have hundreds of these in your factory, and you can pull that data at millisecond rates. It takes discipline and it takes a little bit of work, but defining why you're collecting data to some level and pulling it together so that you're not drowning in data is critical. But that also accelerates what Brian's talking about. These large language models and different AI approaches need contextualized data. Otherwise, a common thing that this research didn't go into, but we often hear from people, is that the data scientists that they're talking about here, they're spending 80% of their time trying to integrate data and find data and not on actually using it. So whether it's the language models unleashed on a set of data or data scientists unleashed on a set of data, if we can deliver them the data contextualized for their purpose, then I think we can accelerate all of that and really put it to good use. The whole edge device thing, I'm not really sure where they were going with that question. We do see analytics moving back to the edge over time. I think learning happens in the cloud, but some analytics that latency is critical or reliability is critical will be moving to the edge and utilizing edge devices. I haven't seen a lot of that yet, but there are certainly a lot of people that are looking into that and questioning that.
Yeah, maybe just a different way to look at that. I think I personally struggled with this emergence of edge over the last, it's probably been talked about for 6-8 years, probably, and
more
with a lot of ambiguity, in my opinion. And people immediately went to that closed loop control analogy, right? Like, how do we deploy models? And like we absolutely do that for our clients, and like that's great. But what I really like on the edge side is actually manipulating that data and transforming that data at the edge. Not so much from like a cost or a financial, but it's to sort of John's other point, that 80% cleansing. If we can move more of the right data in the right shape, in the right context, in the right form early, it just makes the world a happier place downstream, because we don't have a bunch of people like mucking through large data sets, having to have lots of meetings to cull through things. That to me is the value of edge right now, and where it really marries up to DataOps, industrial DataOps.
Okay, let's move on to our next question, which is, how does contextualization of data fit in? Is it part of the data delivery within the DataOps platform, or the applications take care of it themselves?
Yeah, I'll jump on this. The challenge with industrial data is that a lot of the people that own the target applications don't know how to contextualize it, because the industrial data tends to be extremely raw. So to Brian's previous point, if you can contextualize that and standardize it at the edge, and then deliver it to the target applications, you're dealing with the proper persona who can do it, which is the domain experts of the sources of the data, and you're able to be much more efficient about delivering it, and you satisfy a lot of your cybersecurity needs. So you've got a performance benefit, you've got a persona benefit, and you've got a security benefit to doing that closer to where the data is sourced. Okay. And you only do it once instead of in every target application, because the target applications are only increasing.
Yep.
Okay, we are slightly over the top of the hour, so I am going to slide in one more question. And the question is, which industry is the best target for starting these kind of revolutions?
So I think everyone is transforming in their own rate. I think process industries historically have captured more data, right, through process historians and things like that. Certain discrete industries have, a tremendous amount of discrete and transactional data and really move forward with PLM and MES and a lot of, these types of executed workflows. The bottom line is it's everyone, right? It's everyone that's doing that. I would say that on our side at Deloitte, from a very narrow DataOps perspective, we're seeing a lot of interest in the life sciences area. We're seeing a lot of interest in the aerospace and defense area, and so those are very separate sort of aspects. But wherever I think there's lots of systems, lots of slack in the data environment, right? Lots of waste going on. It's pretty clear value proposition.
Yeah, so I agree with Brian. It's wide ranging. We're seeing it in life sciences. We're seeing it in A&D. We're also seeing it in metals and food and beverage, and we're seeing it in automotive and industrial products and consumer products. really wide range. A lot of it has to do with the leaders. It's about leadership. It's about digital transformation leadership and commitment, more than the industry that you're in, from our perspective.
Okay, we are going to have to conclude right there. Excellent discussion, gentlemen. I would like to take a moment to thank our panel, John Harrington, Brian Zakrasik, and Brent Robertson. And of course, I'd like to thank our sponsor, HighByte. Most of all, however, I'd like to thank our audience for their kind attention and their great questions. And on behalf of Industry Week, everybody, have a great, productive remainder of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Brent.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, John.
Great conversation.